This is the I Heart My Life show. Welcome to the I Heart My Life show. So, if you've ever felt like you had to choose between growing a business and taking time for yourself, especially as a parent, just know you aren't alone and this episode is for you. What if rest wasn't just necessary, but actually the key to growth? I know for me, that's been something that's been a big stumbling block, especially being a parent to a toddler for the first time. And it's something I'm learning behind the scenes and right alongside so many of you. So today's guest, Caffrey, is a best-selling author, a business optimizer, and an expert in helping entrepreneurs build thriving businesses without draining their time or resources. Through her work and her book, The Sabbatical Method, she teaches business owners how to create sustainable systems that allow them to step away while their companies continue to grow. She's also the founder of Master Maternity Leave, a movement dedicated to helping parents prepare for time away from their businesses without stress or guilt. In this conversation, we're going to dive into the power of rest, not just for personal well being, but as a strategy for long term business success. So, again, if you're ready to create a business that supports your life instead of the other way around, this is the episode for you. So, Allie, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Emily. Honestly, this is such an important conversation. So I appreciate you inviting this into the fold.
Oh, yeah, I'm so excited because selfishly, like I said, there's a lot for me to learn. I want to have another child at some point coming up. And so I feel like there's things I could do a lot better this time around. So excited to learn from you.
Yeah, of course. I work with a ton of moms who are like, I want a maternity leave do over, please. Like, I had the first one and maybe the second one could be a little bit better. And truthfully, that's my story. So I love that you're thinking out ahead of this.
Yeah. So take us in, let us know, a little bit more about your journey, because obviously, as we all know, many of us who do this work, if it's for personal reasons, we've been through something and it led us to want to help other people. So what has your journey been like?
I always say I fell into entrepreneurship. I have a really strong operations and systems background. I was always the number two gal, like the one behind the scenes. It was super hard, honestly, to step into entrepreneurship. I always saw myself as the person who was solving the problems, not the big visionary, not the one who was really driving, big time results. And I fell into entrepreneurship in about 2017, like toward the end. And so this is my 8th year running a business. I run an operations consultancy called Operations Agency, which is where we really help founders like weave themselves out of the day-to-day operations of the business and really move into a more scalable or exitable type of company, or truthfully, just one that supports your lifestyle. And in the sabbatical method, I go deep into why those two types of businesses aren't exactly like mutually exclusive. They're actually the same thing. So, truthfully, when I got knocked on my bum for the first time in business ownership, which is true for everybody, right? We all get knocked on our bum in several different ways over several different years, depending on how long we've been in the game. But I was a fractional COO when I first started Operations Agency, and I was the loop closer. I was the person that kept everything on time, supported these high growth companies. And we had tried for a couple of years to get pregnant with our first son. And, I remember Googling how to plan a self employed maternity leave. This was years before my sabbatical work. This was years before anything that I started doing there, weaving founders out of the business, like really traditionally. And the Google search term that came up, it was before AI, and it was just, the number one article. And the synopsis was largely self employed women are on their own and planning maternity leave. And my heart just kind of sunk. I was like, what do you mean? Like, running a business is so hard and it's so challenging every day. And I was working on these, high growth projects and with these really fast growing businesses. And I was like, man, how come this isn't easier? How come nobody's figured this out? And so I did what every business owner likely does in the beginning. I'm like, well, I've figured everything else out to this point. I'll just kind of figure it out. And so I wung it. I was like, I'll just take it all in stride. And there was a moment, after I'd had our son. So he was born in August of 2020. And we had just gotten moved to the room that we would spend the night in after I'd birthed him. And my husband snaps this picture of me and my newborn son. And the moment that he didn't capture right after was me taking him sleeping and putting him into the clear bassinet next to the bed and whipping out my phone and answering emails and Slack messages to my clients and my team, being like, I just had our baby. I'll be back on Monday. It was Thursday. And so that's when, in the back of my mind, I was like, look how dedicated I am to my business. Look how easy this could be. But I knew in my heart, I was like, this is a very, very specific instance where you're choosing your business over your family. And truthfully, that's kind of what set things in motion and planted the seed around really needing a way to not just approach like operations, because I'd done that forever, but really approach a business that feels like it supports your life and all the things that come in. So whether that's maternity leave, whether that's a health situation that you want to address, whether that's a month off in the summer, whether that's a full 3 month sabbatical, like we all is welcome here. And every business can look very different, just like every parenthood can look different. Every child looks different. Everybody's situation is a little bit unique. So that's how I got into what I'm doing now. And of course, lots of things splintered from there. I launched a book in 2023 specifically about taking sabbatical. 22, on the heels of my second maternity leave, I launched Master Maternity Leave, which is a curriculum for self employed individuals who want to take a maternity leave and actually bond with their baby without worrying about their business falling apart. So lots and lots of things have come from there. I feel like my kids, as they usually do, provided a lot of momentum and clarity in the work that I do and the impact that I want to make. And so I feel like these last few years have been really momentous, not without challenge, but also just really clarifying on where I feel like I can really impact people at a deep level.
Thank you so much for sharing that with me. It's so beautiful. And I can so relate. I was scrolling through my phone a few months ago and saw some pictures from, I don't know, a few months after my daughter was born, and I was hosting a webinar. And I was thinking to myself, oh my goodness, like, what was I doing? Like, I didn't have to do that. Like, why did I make that decision? And, even just a few weeks after having her as well. And it's crazy that we start these businesses for freedom, but then actually have the complete opposite at the most important times in our lives. And like you said, whether it's a baby or even last week, we went to Florida with my family for 10 days. And I was telling my husband, I was like, oh my gosh, I probably only worked like 3 hours in 10 days. And that wasn't the intention. And it was actually really challenging for me because I felt like a lot of things slipped through the cracks. But we were on vacation with four toddlers and my family, my whole extended family, and there just like wasn't any time. And I was telling him next year, I need to do things differently. I need to actually plan to take this entire time off so I can be really present instead of being half there, half thinking about my business. So, like I said, super invested in this conversation for personal reasons as well. So tell us a little bit more. Like, obviously, the driven business owner, they have big goals. They want to reach next level. They want to have abundance, all the things. They're probably challenged at relinquishing control. Why is taking a sabbatical so important, not just for their mental health, but for the growth of the business and everything that they want to achieve?
Yeah, totally. So this is a great question because I think it has a couple layers. So I think of running a business kind of like training for, a marathon, right? For example. And then it never stops, right? You're always training for the next big thing, or sometimes you get knocked on your bum, like I said before. And ultimately, if you go and partner with a coach who's going to help you train for this marathon, they're going to do a couple of things strategically. First, they're going to ease you into the training plan, right? That doesn't always happen with us entrepreneurs, right? We are hustle, grind, go through, break through the wall. If there isn't a door there, like that's what we think. And what got us here is not going to get us to the next level in business. And what the second thing that these marathon coaches do is they build in specific rest points. And this is really critical because I think if we want to operate at a high level, achieve high levels of success, we need to build rest into the curriculum a little bit more formally for a couple of reasons. One, you can use rest instead of taking some time off, you can improve your system. So say you do this webinar and you're like, great, what was the traffic strategy? What were we doing to promote it? How were we converting people into this? How did we show up on the webinar? What was the curriculum? How did we engage with the comments? How did we make our offer at the end? You can look at that and take that moment of rest, let's just say a down week or a down day, to improve that system, make it easier for you moving forward. And or most of us founders, we just need to get the heck out of there so our team can do it and actually trust that our people have got us covered on some of those improvement measures. So taking a break from the business and being able to recover mentally, physically, I believe getting yourself out of the day-to-day operations of the business at a really frequent clip can help with creativity, with production of new ideas. That was my truth. And it's honestly how I broke out of being like identifying as the behind the scenes person to being an actual driver and CEO of both of my companies, is because I take myself out of the day to day operations and I'm like, okay, what's the big picture here? So I find that leaders are able to lead more capably and they're able to actually rest. I mean, actually give themselves the break. Even if you are training for a marathon, I think it's something on average like 10, 12 hours a week of training to run a marathon. And we do that and 10 times more in our business. We're working all the time, burning the candle at both ends. So it's actually really foolish of us to think that we don't need a rest from the business.
Yeah, I agree completely. So, what if somebody's listening to this and they're a little bit newer in business or the cash flow isn't to the point where they can hire a bunch of team members to take over the operations? How do they start to build this into their systems, into their life?
So I work with a lot of solopreneurs who are like, I don't know how I'm going to give somebody something because I don't have anybody, or I've hired somebody in the past and I've tried to delegate it and it just really hasn't worked out for me. So the thing I say to those people is that you've probably delegated in the past, and maybe it wasn't the best effort. Maybe not because of your intention or because of how excited you were about it or because how much time you pulled into it. But I often work with folks who really don't understand the art of delegating because it really is an in-depth process. So often in, operations agency, my operations consultancy, we go through this at a high level with big companies, 500, 700 people. Okay, how do we delegate down the chain and how does this continue? Not like a game of telephone where we lose things in the process, where it really feels like it actually makes it down to the person who is actually completing the work. So that's number one. Number two is I would challenge your level of perfectionism or your level of comfort giving something to somebody else. This is true for me and honestly, hundreds of entrepreneurs that I've spoken with. Oftentimes, delegation falls flat because A, there isn't a system, and because B, we aren't in a position where we're really ready to relinquish control. And so that could look anything like final approval on website wireframes or sending an email out to a partner or to book a podcast, right? Like it could look all different levels. And so, what I would say to a person who's working on their own is to start to really think about what are the drivers in the business. Because oftentimes, when folks delegate things, they're like, well, I'm going to delegate my calendar, I'm going to delegate my email, or I'm going to delegate admin stuff, which I'm a huge fan of. Like, I want to get some of that mundane stuff off of my plate. But instead of doing that, what if we decided that we were just going to duplicate some of the biggest drivers inside of our business? So I think about things like my very first hire was another person who could be like a little mini COO behind myself as the business owner. And that made a huge difference, Emily, because what happened was is I was able to take on more clients. So business went up. Versus if someone just took over my email, that wasn't necessarily a driver for us and I couldn't accept more clients. So I would consider if you're building websites, if you're doing some kind of strategy, like hire a person who's going to help you double the business load of what you have or be able to take over some of those big drivers so that you can actually increase your revenue instead of being in a position where you just have somebody coming in and doing administrative tasks. It's going to feel less impactful because of the fact that it's not driving revenue at that point.
I love that. So I do think there's some people listening who might have, maybe it's a belief, maybe it's reality around, there are things that only I can do. So for example, in my business, like a lot of the work that I do, it's very scalable. And so I don't need to hire another coach necessarily. I could, but like it's very scalable. It's self-study. Things can kind of operate on their own. And so for me, some of the admin stuff off my plate would be better because then I could go and I could like speak to more clients, I could do
Mhm.
more sales calls, all of that sort of front facing stuff where I'm doing outreach. And maybe that's a limiting belief, but like in my mind, that's what I go to is, there are some admin things that if I had that off my plate, then I could do some of the sales stuff. But then are you also saying then add another layer and say, well, who could do the sales outreach for you in addition to that?
Yeah, and I think it's both. It's a both and honestly, because I think there's a lot of people who, and let me just say this, I guess, at a high level, is we started these businesses because we saw a need in the marketplace and we can create whatever kind of structure we want. And even as an operations strategist, people will come to me and be like, well, what operating structure do you use? Do you like EOS? And I'm like, listen, I believe that operations need to be simple and they need to support the business that exists now and the place that we want to go. And I've seen tons of different types of models, offers, you name it, the container, I've seen it. And I believe that we hear all of these things when we go to grow our business that you should have an EA or you should have a project manager or you should have a sales team. My answer is like, if it's working and it's optimized, like don't break it. So if you feel like you want to lean into sales, then yeah, hire out for the admin stuff. But if you're like, hey, listen, I block all this time for sales and it never seems to be enough, then yeah, maybe duplicate yourself and see if you can have a setter or somebody who can support you in having those initial conversations. It does look different for every business. I don't believe there's like a one size fits all hiring model for delegation. I think we need to start with our time and the direction that we want the business to go in. Ask ourselves, do I love this or is it a driver in the business? And just literally take everything else out.
That's so good. And when it comes to the sabbatical method, is there a specific framework that you advise people to follow?
Yeah, most definitely. So, preparing your business for a sabbatical is a really incredible experience, really similarly to planning for maternity leave. I love the family bonding element that exists with maternity leave. It's such an exciting time. It also can be pretty stressful. Sabbatical and maternity leave are similar in the fact that we want to prepare our business to function in a sense without us. And I think there are levels to that, right? And I go through this in the book. But the first level is like the assister level. And so being an assister in the business versus a doer, I use a basketball analogy, right? Some of the highest performing players in basketball are actually the assisters, the folks that tee up others to score. And I think that is level one, especially if you suffer from what we were talking about before, that perfectionist, that reluctance to let go. You can start to assist your team in key outcomes. This could look as simple as sending a Loom video like, hey, this is what I'm really looking for. You go handle it, and really starting to get comfortable at that level one of delegation and even systems creation, right? Level two is the coach. So the coach creates frameworks and scenarios for how things need to go, but give their people the ability to create the plays and things on their own or co create them together. So you're really giving people frameworks for how to think, not what to do. Does that make sense? So oftentimes when I find level twos, those coaches are able to go out of the business for an amount of time. We want everybody at sabbatical level and maternity leave level to be at level two or above. So the third level is the Warren Buffett level. This is the owner of the team, right? If we're using the team analogy, I guess we could go with Mark Cuban. But for the most part, right, it's the owner of the team. And really what they are doing is making sure that things are viable, that the right people are in the right places, and casting that big picture vision, making those key partnerships, which I honestly see at some of the businesses. And they don't even have to be gigantic. They just need to be really, really clear and really, really specific on what exactly they're doing. And honestly, I see people who are able to achieve a really, really incredible work life balance at the owner level and actually feel like an owner or a CEO of their business and not like the highest paid administrative person.
I love that analogy. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, sure.
And so it sounds like the first step is to really understand, like you said, what are the key drivers in the business? Also, what do you love? And also, where are you like consistently lacking in time? And then start to kind of plug in those key people on your team. And then the next step would be to add in the coaches.
Yeah, or to make frameworks for decision making. Yeah, because that's the big thing. I think a lot of folks know what to do with the day in and day out. So let's just say the 80% of the business, you can create SOPs all day, every day for whatever. And once your business grows and your people become really proficient in their roles, what they're going to ask is, how do I make decisions? How do I read
Got it.
between the lines? How do I guide this?
And then you empower them to be able to make those decisions without you.
Yeah,
Love it.
absolutely. And honestly, I've seen like the most simplest decision making guideline documents, meetings, discussions really change a culture inside of a business.
Yeah, beautiful. And so you said the frameworks are very similar. So what do you advise people to do if they are thinking about maternity leave? Is it the same sort of process? And also, what time frame are we looking at? So, like, say you want to have a baby in a year. When do you start implementing all this? I know it's like right away, but how much time do you actually need?
I always joke with my clients, Emily, when they ask me this question, I'm like, the best time to start preparing is the same timeline as the best it's time to plant a tree, right? It's either 10 years ago or now. So I think there's never a too early time to start preparing either of these. So even if you don't plan on having a kiddo, immediately, or you're not pregnant, or even if you're not planning on going on sabbatical immediately, you may be in a situation like one of my clients years ago came to me, and this is when I got kind of the idea around the sabbatical method. She came to me and she had lipidemia. And so lipidemia is a challenge with keeping weight on, like your body doesn't process things. And so she had to get her lymphatic system drained like every 4 hours. And she was an executive coach. So she would work with high level tech companies, GoDaddy, Airtable, like those types of folks. And she coached their executive team. So she was on stage a lot. She was in person a lot. She was traveling a lot. And the fact of the matter was, she came to me and she was like, Allie, I really need to be able to focus on my health. My doctors say it's absolutely imperative, and I have no idea what I'm going to do. And so I always say that there are the planned moments that you can be out of the business, like what I'm talking about, maternity leave, sabbatical. And there are also the unplanned moments where, honestly, the last week, my kiddos have been super sick and I've really been in front of my computer at an absolute minimum. And the reason I can do that is because my team has all of the things that they need to keep things moving with my absence. And it happens very few and far between with these unplanned types of, exits from the business. But I want to make sure that everybody knows here that this is absolutely to maximize time that you plan to have off from the business. And generally speaking, we are improving our relationship with our business, right? Meaning that it supports our life, it's not a drain on our time and resources, and you can come in and out as you sort of please. At the beginning of this year, I decided I super didn't want to work my traditional 4-day-a-week schedule that I've been working for years. I only want to work 2 days a week. I really want to focus on things that really are driving results with our clients in master maternity leave and an operations agency. And I just made a decision, just moved my calendar around. I was like, I'm going to work these 2 days. Here are the things that can come on, and here are the things that can't. And honestly, my team was like, "Yeah, no, totally. We've done we've done this before." It felt really good. And so I want to kind of preface my maternity leave conversation with that because I really do fundamentally believe that starting to plan for maternity leave. So if you're trying to conceive, maybe you have a kiddo and you want to do things a little bit better the second time, starting to plan as early as possible is going to be so incredible because we have an opportunity to rewrite how this business operates and how it supports our life. Because maternity leave, although you can't get that time back, and I'm such a huge believer of being able to press pause and be present to bond with your baby and like handle all the other challenges that come along with being postpartum and having a new baby. But also, when we go back to our business, we don't want to just go right back into the old habits and the old things that used to stress us out. That was my story when I first had our first son, Frank. And like, it just was not a great business that supported our family. And so when I was hit with that very serious reality, I literally started questioning. I was like, do I even have the chops or what it takes to be a business owner? Like, does my career choice actually support our family or doesn't it? And so I was really faced with that. And it wasn't until I really took ownership of the experience and was like, no, wait a second. When I take another maternity leave, I have this permission slip to rewrite how everything works. Because just like having a new baby and your entire life changes, the dynamic in your family, your emotions, and all the things like your heart lives outside of your body in these fragmented pieces. Like you have that opportunity in your business too. So starting to plan early as possible is going to be incredible for you. And it'll just alleviate that stress a little bit. Tactically speaking, when I go to plan a maternity leave, first I think through timeline. So when do we want to be off? How much time do we have? What does that look like? Second, I look at founder's calendar. So what are we doing? What are we promising? How are we tied to the business? Third, I look at financials. So we see how much money do we have aside? How much do we need? Are we needing to keep things moving? Do we have a reserve in our personal stash to be able to support through this? Can the business withstand us being out for an amount of time? I also look at state resources and any insurance. So depending on how the business is formed, what state you're in, you may be able to get some additional cash either from the state or from your short-term or long-term disability insurances. And then we really start to look at the next level of your business model. So we'll see, okay, what are we moving forward with? How do we want our life to look after baby? What systems need to be in place? And we start the preparing process. So I 10 out of 10 don't recommend going it alone. I remember floundering so hard through this experience. And there's a lot of fragmented material out there where like there's a piece here that's really good or a piece here that's really good. And so what I've done over the last few years is like taken all of the things that are available, put them into one central location, and then created our framework on top of it, which I actually feel is really powerful. And it's changed the game for a lot of the women that have come through because they're like, I didn't even know anything like this existed. And I was like, well, it didn't because I searched really hard for it and I had to make it.
So amazing. So there's a few things I want to highlight here for everyone. So
Yeah, yeah.
number one, you mentioned how oftentimes if we don't give ourselves that sabbatical or that break, or we have to choose between our personal life and our business, it leads to resentment. And so I just want to anchor that in because that's another reason for those of us who are the doers and want to do everything and want to, keep grinding away, that it can lead to resentment for the business and create an unhealthy relationship. And I've definitely had that over the last 10 years at multiple periods, and it's not fun, right? And then you end up turning things off that aren't actually broken, or you just make terrible decisions and you don't realize it's actually like because you have an unhealthy relationship with your business. Anyway, so that piece I wanted to highlight. And then the second piece is that your sabbatical or your maternity leave give you the chance to kind of reinvent how you're going to do things and rethink. And I believe that that really happens naturally and organically because you are changing, like you said, in so many different ways. Your family's changing if you do have a baby, if you're on sabbatical, you have the time and space to be creative, to think differently, to just take a breath, to take care of your health, all those pieces. And, that is like it's a permission slip to do things differently. And so I love that you're reminding us of those two things because I think that's so, so important and can help people really start to get excited about the process that you're describing.
Yeah, totally. I mean, the benefits I'm still seeing today. And my youngest son just turned 3. So, I mean, honestly, the fact that we were able to press pause, I mean, teammates rose up into leadership positions. We changed core offers. We highlighted core marketing systems. I mean, it really forces you to get clear. And I love those forcing functions because I'm sure you know this, Emily. Like when I was first in business, like I just thought it was hustle, 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 grind, 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 do all the things, start up all, like open all the loops, start up all the channels. Right. And then when I really was forced to look, like I was like, okay, we've been doing this for a little while. How do we just refine and take a look at some of the most impactful drivers in the business and our marketing and our sales and our delivery and our systems and finance? Like it just ended up opening up all of these doors and honestly permission to just say no to stuff. And I think that's one of the hardest things, especially as moms. Like we just want to please. We just, if we're running a service based business, we want to say yes to all the things. And it starts to weigh on us. And I have a really incredible coach years ago I worked with, and they have a wonderful brand called Family Brand. And one of their main taglines is give our families our best, not what's left. And I resonate with that so much. And I think that's one of the reasons why we've worked together on multiple levels is like, it really is about making sure that we have a business that supports our life. Like that through line should be there and not the other way around. We shouldn't be feeling like our business is robbing time from our kiddos, especially when they're so little. I love that you highlighted the resentment piece because it's something that isn't quite touchable or tangible exactly, but we feel it. Like we feel it in our heart, we feel it in our brain when we go to do things inside of our business, when we have to miss key things with our family. And I just invite everybody listening to imagine a possibility. Imagine the idea that that doesn't need to be the case, especially if you feel really deep in it right now.
Yeah, and I think for those who don't have kids, oftentimes it might look like you're not be able to give to yourself, right? You don't have the rest, you're not able to exercise, to make the foods, the meals that you want to make, to see friends or whatever it may be. Because I know for me, having a daughter 2 years ago, that obviously adds a whole nother level of, time I want to be spending with her and dedication that I have to my family. But before that, it was like my health would suffer or I
Mhm.
wouldn't take time for other relationships, for my spouse, all of those pieces. And so I think it's really important that we look at that. I know you believe in work life integration and, really consider how we can improve that because I think oftentimes the belief system is one of scarcity, like only I can do this, or,
Mhm.
there's never enough time. And so, like, I can't, all these adjustments aren't going to do anything, right? Like, there's so many negative thought processes around this, but I love what you're sharing and how we get to look at things in a different way.
Yeah, I mean that's the key, right? It's so simple and it's also kind of scary, right? If you really have never been down a path like this, if you haven't thought about getting yourself out of the business, if you are feeling like everything does rely on you, it's hard to break that cycle. And I just want to empathize and acknowledge that. If anybody who's listening is like, man, I haven't been able to like go for a walk or eat a nourishing meal or cook for myself or do something I always really loved because I'm so in service of this business. I get it. Like I've totally been there. I've been there throughout moments of my business career, right? So it's not something that I think is a one and done, it's an actual practice. And I believe that with operations, generally speaking, is like our operating structure and the way that we work and the way that our relationship is in the business, it changes. It changes over time a lot. And if I told my 8 years ago self when I was first starting that I was only going to be working 2 days a week, literally from 8 to 3, so not even a full day, I think I would have laughed in my own face. I would have like so there was just a part of me that didn't even believe it was possible.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And so, for everyone listening who is doubting or is in a place of disbelief or wondering if it's possible for them, do you have any client stories that you can share with us that will highlight some of the possibility? I don't know if there's anyone who's taken an extended sabbatical or any of the moms who have taken maternity leaves.
Yeah, absolutely. I can share a handful of stories actually. So I'll share Carly. So Carly came to me in 2023, early 2023. She was taking her second maternity leave and she ran an in person video studio. So clients would come to her. She would shoot, she would film, and she would lead the editing team. She was the face of the business and she had a physical location. So she had to be in person at that location. And I remember talking with Carly the first time, and she was like, I just don't even understand how I'm going to be able to take a week or 2 weeks off from being in studio. And it was really interesting, actually. So she did have a team. The team was very small. And her COO, which was not her title at the time, really came into the fold when we started planning her maternity leave. And she was like, listen, Carly, I love you. I care about this business. And I really have been wanting an opportunity to get into leading the team more formally and running these shoots and preparing for everything and managing the booking team. And Carly was floored. She was like, what do you mean? And so I think the really incredible thing about this, and she took a 3-month maternity leave and now works in her business less than ever. Her son is, I think, 3, almost like mine. And the craziest thing about this whole thing is that in the beginning, she was like, I don't know who would take this over. I don't know who. And so the takeaway from the story is I believe that we as business owners holding on to all the things actually block really capable people from being able to come in and support us. So whether that's a team that you currently have or a team that you could be inviting into the fold and having support you through some of these extended periods of time or any of those things. And so I just actually encourage you to start talking about what you want, like just voicing it out loud. A lot of my clients and I talk about like the hardest part about being supported is knowing what kind of support you need. And it's okay to not know every single thing, especially as a new mom. Like you're like, I don't know what the heck's going on here. I don't even know what to ask for. But just being able to tell that to somebody, right? Whether that's your partner or somebody in your business or a mentor or a coach that you're working with, just be able to voice the thing that you want or try to voice the thing that you want, because then all of a sudden doors and possibilities start to open. When you're like, this is the thing that I desire, people start to make themselves known to you, right? They say, oh, hey, I could probably do something like that. And so that's the easiest first step, is to be like, hey, I might be working a little bit too much. I desire to close my computer at 5 p.m.
Oh, so good. Yeah, my whole framework is centered around understanding your desires and tuning into that and being clear with that. Because so many people, number one, they say they don't know what they want. And if they do, then they don't follow it or they don't believe it's possible for them. So I love that so much.
I'm so aligned. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
What are some of the other actionable steps that people can take just as we start to wrap up this episode that will help them kind of free themselves from doing everything in the business or feeling obliged to do everything?
Ooh, I love this. So, two really important things. I have, I guess, like a framework and then a practice that you can do. So, my framework for anything that you want to make in your life, even if you feel like you don't have enough time to improve your business or you don't have enough time to plan a maternity leave and you just really feel strapped, there's a principle that I implement called the 90-90 principle. 90-90 is super simple to remember. It's 90 minutes of focus for 90 days. And I believe that you can create a totally different life and a totally different business with 90 minutes of focus on something for 90 days. Pick one thing. So if you're like, hey, I've really been, overlooking my health, or I really haven't been spending like quality, intentional time with my family, block 90 minutes, get that in, have it be every single day, every like same time on the calendar, and watch what happens with that short amount of time. When I started doing this principle, I started it actually when I wrote my book. I was like, there's no way I'm going to have enough time to write a book. And then I just blocked 90 minutes. I wrote for 90 days. I wrote for 30 days for the first draft, and then I did all the other things. But that was my 90-minute book time. And I have a totally different business, and I have a physical thing that it's like amazing. It's one of the proudest things I've ever created in my business. And so I invite you to think like, okay, it can really only be 90 minutes of focus for 90 days. Don't try to overhaul your whole schedule or do anything wild. Just say, hey, I'm committed to this practice. So the second thing that you can do is start to put some strategic blocks in your calendar. So you've got your 90-90, you're doing those things, right? Instead of missing lunch, working till 8, or picking the computer back up, or working on Fridays, or working on the weekend, ask yourself the question, what would need to be true for me to stop working at 5 or not work on Fridays or not work a full weekend? I think we as entrepreneurs believe that we are so needed in the business, and it's actually really hard to let that go because it feels good to be needed in some ways. But then, of course, like we talked about, that resentment builds. But start to kind of peel yourself back from the business and have that represent on your calendar. So whether it's a day a week that you don't, want to work, or that you don't, actually jump into the business, and use those three levels I talked about before, the assister. So if you're the doer, and you're like, all right, this is my first shot at getting a new teammate in, I'm just going to channel a sister for Fridays. Like, that's just how that's going to be. Like, start where you are and start to block your calendar, because I actually believe wholeheartedly that one of the emotional barriers to us taking time off in the business is the fact that we literally don't know how. We don't know what to do with our hands. And so if we don't practice taking some time or having those full weekends to power down and then power back up, or actually close the laptop at 5, or take a full week off, right? We can build to this. I don't believe that taking a 3-month maternity leave is going to be as saturated as it can be with that presence and that time and those ideas and the focus on our family, because we're going to be still in the mode of, I'm literally working every single day in my business, and then all of a sudden it stopped. And so it's going to be like cold turkey type of vibe. I don't want that for anybody, not on maternity leave, not on sabbatical. So start to peel yourself back from the business. I always tell my moms to try to take a 1-week demo through the planning process where you're taking a week off. Maybe it's for the baby moon. Maybe you go somewhere as a family. Super exciting time. You can kind of see what falls through the cracks. But I would start with those two. Block 90 minutes for 90 days and start to peel yourself back strategically from the business, whether that's, at 5 closing, taking Fridays, or taking full weekends.
Oh, I love it so much. Thank you for sharing all of that. And for anyone who's interested in working with you, whether it's through the sabbatical work or the maternity leave work, how do they find you? Where do they go?
Yeah, of course. I have an awesome training that we just totally redid for moms who are planning maternity leaves from their business. So that's at mastermaternityleave.com/training. It should be live here in like 2 days at the time of this recording. It's like fresh and wonderful. I just recorded it and it's amazing. So go there. It's totally free. It's about 60 minutes of your time. And I always believe in video controls. So you can watch it at 2x and save yourself some time. And then if you're in a position where you're like, hey, I'm not planning a maternity leave, but I'm totally vibing with a lot of the things that you're talking about, at AlysonCaffrey.com, I have an amazing free handbook. It's called the Remove Yourself from Your Business Handbook. And it is literally the 37-page field guide for what I would do if you hired me to remove yourself from your business. So I cover it all in there, like did not hold back. You'll also hear some like fun stories about how I came up and a couple clients I've worked with. And it's just like honestly a super fun read. So you can grab that at AlysonCaffrey.com. And I just want to say thanks. Like, this is hard work, and I know that it's totally worth it. And it's not lost on me that it's a lot of people's first time. And I get super excited whenever I think about weaving folks out of businesses. So appreciate y'all, I don't know, listening to my super fast banter and all of my lengthy frameworks about how to do it.
You're amazing, and your passion, it's so obvious. So I love it. So final question for everyone listening. We always do this at the end of every episode. What is one way that people can create a life that's better than their dreams?
Believe it, like with everything. And I know it's hard, but I think belief is a practice also. And so, for example, like we want to build a house in the woods here in Colorado. And I was like, as we get closer to it, my belief deepens. Like I can feel it, I can taste it. And so anytime that you have a huge dream, think about, similar to 90-90, what I talked about before. Find a piece of your day every day that you can just reinstill that belief, that you can pour into yourself, whether that's like visualizing or writing, like 10 reasons why I'm going to have my house in the woods. I even uploaded it for this year as the background on my phone, like a super inspirational photo of like what exactly the vibe I'm looking for. And I remember when I told my husband almost 10 years, a little over 10 years ago, that I wanted a house in the woods and a farm and a homestead. And he was like, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard. So and he loves me and I love him, and we are thick as thieves. And there will be people out there who also don't see the thing that you see yet. But it's most important that you believe it, because when you believe it, you invite others to believe it too.
Thank you. I love that so much. Amazing. Well, thank you, Allie. This has been incredible. So grateful. Everyone go get both of her books, take the class, go through the ebook. You're going to change so many lives just by people listening and watching this. So thank you so much for your energy and for all this information.
Thanks, Emily. I really appreciate you having me. I had a blast.
Thank you for listening to the I Heart My Life show. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with 3 friends or post about it on social media using the hashtag I Heart My Life show. And don't forget to rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts. It really does help us spread the movement far and wide. Remember, everything you desire is possible. Keep believing in your dreams and taking action.